Burma's opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi is calling for Western countries to end sanctions against the country's military regime. She says the sanctions have hurt ordinary Burmese, as about a third of the country's 50 million people live below the poverty line.
Burma's National League for Democracy party says it wants to talk with Western nations about cutting back sanctions against the military-ruled state. The National League for Democracy, or NLD, added that responsible investment guidelines could make life better for ordinary people in the impoverished but resource-rich country. The condition: all political prisoners must be released for sanctions to be lifted.
The sanctions were not imposed because the NLD called for them. These were not imposed just because of the demand of just a particular person. The countries that impose these sanctions, they have their own reasons in doing it. The main reasons for imposing the sanctions are violation of human rights, lack of democratic practices, and the rule of law.
Just over 50 years ago, the former British colony was one of Southeast Asia's most promising and wealthiest nations, the world's biggest rice exporter and major energy producer. According to BP's statistical review, the country's proven gas reserves doubled in the past decade to 570 billion cubic meters, equivalent to almost a fifth of Australia's. Revenues from those reserves are tightly held among the ruling military elite.
It's up to the respective countries to decide whether to lift the sanctions or not. They will make the decision after a consideration of the human rights violations, and if there is the rule of law, and so on.
The sanctions were called on by Burmese pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi. She was released from her latest detention in November. But many experts say sanctions have failed because the regime's wealth has swelled because of trade and energy deals with China and Thailand. Experts say Suu Kyi might act as mediator between the West and the reclusive generals. Out of 50 million people living in Burma, about a third of them live below the poverty line.